then in Pompano Beach, and 95.3 FM, W237BD Boca Raton, the Health and Wealth Radio Network.
Selfless service is the guiding principle that drives Army National Guard soldiers to be always ready whenever disaster strikes. They are your next-door neighbors and your colleagues in schools, offices, and factories. To be a Guard soldier is to stand ready to serve at all times for family, for community, and for country. To learn more, log on to NationalGuard.com or contact an Army National Guard recruiter in your area. Sponsored by the Florida Army National Guard. Aired by the Florida Association of Broadcasters and this station.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel Brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality.
My name is Ricky Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I am Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. Welcome.
Thank you for joining us. If you're joining us, we're live streaming on Facebook, or if you're on the radio in South Florida, we are on 95.3 FM or 1040 AM. Feel free to jot down this number, 888-565-1470. Give us a call and join the conversation. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. And you can also post a question if you're watching us on Facebook. Right? So we'd love to hear from you, especially tonight. I mean, certainly every night, but
sure.
Yeah, tonight's a little special.
It's Memorial Day.
It is Memorial Day, yes. And
unlike the goofy, awkward tweet from the Oval Office this morning, it's not really appropriate to say Happy Memorial Day, is it?
No, it really isn't.
It's a little insensitive at the very least to tell the families of our fallen servicemen and women, have a happy Memorial Day, like it's a barbecue.
Mm-hmm. And, and hope that people, having their day off and barbecues and sort of enjoying their time, do stop and just spend a moment thinking about why we have the day off, right? And why we're having the barbecues and the get-togethers. And, what you said is very important. We don't want to forget those people that have served this country. But I think we also want to look a little bit beyond that, too. I think it's also worth a moment of remembrance to also keep in mind those people who have died as a result of things like domestic violence and sexual violence.
Fighting for civil rights.
Fighting for civil rights, fighting for sexual rights. People who have, really put it out there and put their life on the line for the cause, as it were.
Yeah.
Right? I think they're no less important.
Maybe more important. I don't want to get all cynical, but, if we argue what people are dying for, whether they're dying for the liberty and freedoms of people to come after them or dying for rich politicians getting richer, I think it's a more noble cause if one has to go down fighting.
Yeah. I mean, even the expectation of a fight, the partner of the abusive person who's just trying to create a good relationship, shouldn't be fighting, shouldn't consider their lives on the line. The people who are advocating for social justice and that we just treat people with kindness, dignity, and respect shouldn't have to feel like they're putting their life on the line. And they're certainly not as equipped.
Yeah.
There's no body armor for social justice warriors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, that's deep.
So, so I think we want to...
it is a good time to keep on banging that drum, talking about social justice. Sexual health is social justice.
It truly is.
And until we have equality across the board, for just humans... I was going to say just for sexuality, but
no, it's human. You hit it right on the head. And social justice, sexual justice, it's just justice.
That's right. It's just
basically about the humans
when the
living
Supreme
together.
Court finally, did the right thing because leaving it up to states' rights, as conservatives love to rant about when it serves their purposes.
Oh, of course,
would never in this country allow equal rights to all citizens in all 50 states. So when it comes to something like marriage equality, the Supreme Court had to step in, right?
Right.
So that, places like Oklahoma would have the same, citizens there would have the same rights as everywhere else. Right?
Just like
But to refer to it as gay marriage,
exactly.
gay married?
Exactly.
Like, no, it's married,
Right.
right? There shouldn't be these qualifiers.
Right.
Like, oh, John and Mary got straight married last weekend. Did you hear? Oh, what a lovely cake.
Yeah.
But
it wasn't as colorful.
Why are we so goofy?
Yeah. Well, again, on that same point, it took a Supreme Court decision to say that certain states could not segregate.
Well, right. Remember, because a lot of people don't remember the DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. A lot of people don't know that several years before marriage equality became the law of the land, especially millennials, back in, 96? I don't remember. Hawaii, I think, was the first state.
Yes.
And then Massachusetts. And when this started to happen, of course, the conservatives got all up in a bunch and started freaking out. And although Clinton was in the White House, remember, it was Gingrich's Congress.
That's right.
And they forced him, basically, they strong-armed him to sign the Defense of Marriage Act, which stated that a couple married in a state that recognized same-sex marriage, other states didn't have to recognize.
Didn't have to have the reciprocity.
If a couple was legally married in Hawaii and they moved to Florida, Florida could say, you're not married here.
Right.
You didn't get married in Florida. We don't recognize your weird Hawaiian gay marriage. When would that ever in the history of history ever happen to a heterosexual couple if they moved from Kentucky to Georgia? Georgia saying, oh, you weren't married in Georgia. We don't recognize
if they were
your
mixed
Kentucky.
race.
Oh, right. Wasn't the love anniversary recently?
Yeah,
also?
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was certainly another example of how that was,
That's
again,
what I
suiting
want to
their
talk about
purposes.
tonight. In so many ways, we've come so far. And in our classes at Palm Beach State College, we're always complimenting millennials with all the things there are to give them crap about.
Sure.
We credit them for moving the needle further and quicker than we ever would have seen, even 25 years ago. But why are we still so stuck? Why is it like with sex ed? Here we go round the horn again with the Trump administration now taking its turn to bring us back to exactly where we started 30 years ago.
Right. And
the
it's
needle
hard
has not budged at all with the message. With how do we talk to young
but
people?
I think it has budged. It's moved backwards.
Yeah,
the needle was starting to move.
It was hard I have to admit, it was really hard to give Obama credit for 8 years for not having, he had enough on his plate that sex ed really was not a big issue during his administration, but at least, making some overtures toward moving away from the George W. Bush era, abstinence only till marriage, though that never really went away.
Well, sure,
And
that's still
Obama
still
didn't
kind of
have
the law of the land.
Yeah, Obama didn't really have the chance to do much about that.
Well, he also added considerably to the pot of abstinence only money.
Really?
Oh, yes,
so
he did.
So not just doing nothing, but doing worse.
No. He not only continued it, but he did add significantly to it. That is a criticism that I do, continue to hold.
Yeah.
But I think again, you're talking about the words you just used. It's not considered a big enough issue. There's enough on their plate. It's not politically important enough.
Well, in these particular last 8 years, right? And again, as we've known our whole lives, liberals tend to take things, get complacent pretty easy when there's a victory like, with legalized abortion, there tends to be great, got that.
Right.
Don't have to worry about that anymore. And of course, now,
Right,
40
now there's
years later,
maintaining.
50 years later, abortion rights are still under threat, more so than maybe they have been since we were babies.
Absolutely.
Right.
In some states, almost outlawed outright.
Yeah, or just so many restrictions put in the way of providers. Last I heard, and this is already years ago, there was only 13% of total counties in the entire United States, in all 50 states, that had an abortion provider. I'm sure it's not more.
No,
and
that sounds.
when
I think
Texas
I've read
went through
something
those
very similar. It
nonsense
rings
laws
true.
where these teeny tiny little women's clinics have to have hallways as wide as hospitals, so
Yep.
two gurneys can pass each other, and the doctors have to have
Have
admitting
hospital
privileges. Like,
right.
just utter nonsense. Just stuff that, again, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, should just piss women off.
Right.
Just no sane reason, no health reason, no safety reason, just barriers in women's way.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Like those pseudo clinics, the crisis pregnancy centers we were talking about.
Yeah,
a couple
it's
weeks
nonsense.
ago.
They create crises.
Yeah, and of course everyone's complaining about money and budget and wasting and all of this. I want to talk about wasting millions of dollars flushing it down the toilet.
Well, especially now, and again, this has always been a political irony that it's conservatives who scream and cry the loudest about fiscal responsibility and spending and all this kind of stuff, yet they're the ones that urinate all the money away, in their own little special interests and leave everybody else to dry. And that is the biggest problem. And that's what's happening right now, and especially now in this supposed time of purging and changing and no more business as usual and tightening down.
Oh, yeah, right.
The government the Senate, with almost zero debate or discussion or even consideration, just gave $100 million to the Office of Adolescent Health, which is in the Department of Health and Human Services, for teen pregnancy prevention. And there are only 2 in what they're calling new and innovative strategies.
Of course, no news about this. We haven't heard, even sexuality educators, I haven't heard anybody talking about this.
There are 2 tracks. There are only 2 approaches that are approved here.
Oh, this will be good.
That is, A, prevent adolescents from having sex completely, and B, stop those who already are.
Oh, yeah. There's some effective strategies.
That was approved. That is money that is allocated. It is being spent. What can $100 million do? Forget the sex ed part for a moment. Forget what kind of great education can be given, what we know works, where there is data, where there are years of research. Forget what that can do, with $100 million. How many people can we feed? How many homeless vets can we take care of?
Just stay in our own wheelhouse. Just the thought of the possibility that maybe we can make American teens as healthy as their European counterparts, and as sexually matter of fact and no big deal and automatic. No,
well, that means that we have to accept that sex is a natural part of life.
We're going to take food out of starving people's mouths to spend money to keep our kids ignorant. Exactly. That sounds like par for the course, doesn't it?
There you go. Well, it does seem to fit the overall strategy that has been in place so far.
Remember years ago, we laughed about this for years. We were at a meeting, and everyone was introducing themselves and what they do, and this woman told her name, and it was a Freudian slip. She meant to say she was in teen pregnancy prevention. That was her field.
Yes.
And she accidentally said, I'm in teen sex prevention, and then stumbled, and everybody kind of giggled, and then it burst into a laughter because everybody realized, like, teen sex prevention, yeah, good luck with that.
Right, exactly.
Right? And that was the height of the abstinence only till marriage
that was
campaign.
that was when it first came out. That was when it was first approved. I think it was...
the SPRANs, the special projects money.
Well, under workforce development. And in order for schools to get that.
Right?
Well, the condom money was separate.
But that was another part of the same piece of history. In fact, when W took office, and I do mean took, there was that money that AIDS plan that was already signed.
Right.
That for Africa aid assistance to the AIDS crisis in Africa.
Right.
And there was money for condoms and contraceptive information and sex education. And it was like immediately one of the first things Bush did before they took oil and gas out of the EPA purview.
Right, exactly.
Turned that money around. They said, no, that money is being spent on abstinence programs. Like we were going to export our
he did try
Christian,
that for a while, including added the stipulation that they will withhold funding to any agency, organization, or hospital that does even talk about
that's right.
condoms.
The gag rule.
Right? And you remember it was pretty much the UN and a number of other foundations and the African countries themselves that basically said, you know what, Mr. Bush, keep your dollars.
No thanks.
Because he also undersold it. Right? He also wanted to cut what was already originally agreed on. And he eventually, I will come around and say the punchline or the end of this story is I do respect him for what he ultimately was kind of forced into doing, but then saw the merit in and did continue even in his post-presidency days.
For HIV and AIDS.
Yeah, but he really had to be pushed to this and really had to, they basically say, you know what, forget it. It's not worth it. And then he came back, and then the strategy was ABC.
Right.
Abstinence, be monogamous, and condoms.
Be monogamous.
Right.
And C for condoms.
Right.
But they won't work. See, then he took he put his cronies to work, like who was that kooky right-wing ideologue physician that ran the medical institutes for sexual health.
Hagee?
McElhaney.
Oh, McElhaney in Texas.
Yeah, all of the...
the Medical Institute for Sexual
Condoms
Health.
won't protect you. You'll get a disease even if you use a condom, and everybody has HPV, and that running from the rooftops hysteria.
Right. And by the way...
Because we can't have the kids stooping.
That's right.
That's it. Just tell them don't.
Right. And that's, by the way, it's an important point to make with all of this, that people need to be aware of front titles, that you can have something that sounds really good, really credible on the surface, like the Medical Institutes for Sexual Health, and when you can see that the main person involved is a physician.
They must be. They were all physicians.
That's right. They must know what they're talking about.
Must be medically accurate sex ed information.
Oh boy, I mean,
we talked about that before
worst
too.
Stuff anybody can ever have. So again, don't be fooled by impressive sounding titles. Look to see who these people are behind those titles, because they get away with a lot of stuff that they really should not be getting away with, and get a lot of funding because it sounds good on paper.
So, yeah, this is another really scary part of this Trump madness, because while there's everyday new insanity that everybody's running through the streets with their hair on fire, that can you believe what he just said or what he just did, all of this quiet stuff that's cranking through, like these changes in sex ed policy, environmental policy.
That's behind the
judiciary,
outrage.
But that's what's the most
dangerous.
That's
the manipulation.
Yeah.
The outrage is the manipulation. It's a smokescreen.
Yeah.
Knowing that people are going to get so
admit it's working.
It's like slave trader ants.
Yeah.
Go up to a colony, squirt some nerve toxin in the air.
Make
the
everybody
guards
run
fight
around
amongst themselves, and they just walk in and take the larva.
Take the queen.
Right? It's nuts. It really is, but it is very deliberate strategy, and I think it is something that we do have to do a better job standing up to. Because again, look at all this stuff that's building up. We have this sex ed stuff, which is pretty much abstinence only, with the only exception of if they're already not buying into that message, do everything you can to make them stop.
Yeah.
There is the defunding of Planned Parenthood.
The never-ending attempt.
Oh, no, they've basically done it.
Yeah, now
they've basically done it. And what even on top of that, the gag order about anybody receiving federal funding cannot even talk about abortion. Mm-hmm. Right? So, we've spent a lot of years, and it's been a struggle, and we haven't gone as far as we probably should have, but we did go further than we were in all of this social evolution, and it seems now it's kind of maybe reached a crest, and we're devolving in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And our sexual health, obviously, what we've been talking about since we started this show over the past year or so, it's not only bad and getting worse, but in new ways.
Yeah, exactly. In some new ways, that the fact
I think that there
the
has
empowerment
to be
of certain people.
Yeah, and this connection to the violence that we've been seeing more and more of and talking about.
Yes.
There was an interesting thing, and I haven't heard anybody in any of the billions of talking heads on TV, but I haven't heard any mention of this in the latest school shooting, except that when they showed a couple of pictures from the kid's Facebook page. They showed
the kid that shot the school in San Antonio.
One picture had he had a baseball cap with a peace sign pin on it, and another picture he had a pin with a heart on it. And one of the women newscasters said, I couldn't help but notice, like an elephant in the room, that both of those pictures, he was showing symbols of peace and love, a peace sign and a heart. and yet he committed such a horribly violent act.
Well, I think with the piece, he was also wearing a Born to Kill shirt or something like that.
Yeah, and then somebody else said, well, were they looking for signs of this kind of radicalization, and was it this ideology, and was he a gun nut? Was it this right-wing neo-Nazi? Was he a racist, a terrorist? And then they said, well, no, it was all kinds of random things, so no. But that's adolescence and this struggle for finding identity and getting into a million things. But here's the thing that I don't think anybody picked up on.
No, I haven't heard anybody.
And if you've sat through enough classes from Marilyn Volker, as we have, our dear Marilyn, we've seen every possible iteration of pride flag that there is for every sexual subgroup. And the blue, pink, and purple stripes on the heart pin on the hat he was wearing is bisexual pride
It's part
symbol,
of the flag.
Right?
Yeah.
And millennials, cooler than most adults, with accepting of sexual minorities and bisexuality among some adolescent groups is kind of trendy in some parts of the country. Maybe not in rural Texas, but what were they saying about that bullying was an issue? But all the kids were saying the same thing.
Yeah,
he wasn't being bullied by
his peers.
other kids. He was being bullied by the football coaches because he was a football player, and teachers.
Right. Exactly. And,
Also
put some
saw
other pieces
somewhere
together.
that his family was very involved in their church, and that he was
Greek
involved in the
Orthodox
dance troupe since a young age.
Exactly.
So a high school kid who maybe is trying to express a bisexual identity, or wearing a bisexual pride
struggling
pin,
with one,
or maybe his friends know and are cool with it, but the football coaches don't have
the dance
the same,
troupe enough is probably to bring on some of that.
To torture and not that, we can ever justify this kind of insane violence, but I think you said something earlier today that struck me really like a brick in the forehead. This current climate we're in and this kind of rage that's been given a new, fresh pass, it seems like a lot of these kids that used to turn their anger inwards and kill themselves are now turning it outward and going on these rampages.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons what we've always
weren't
seen...
the Columbine kids, weren't there buzzes about them being gay?
Yeah, or at least, some curiosity.
Yeah.
Right. Years ago, I mean, in 4 years, we've seen that, kids who are struggling with sexual identity issues, there's a reason why they have the highest suicide rates. Again, I was trying to look up the date to find out exactly when it was. I'm thinking 98 or 99 or something like that. But the kid who was like class president, honor society, president of this club, president of that club, everything, I would say classic overachiever, one day just stepped in front of a train.
Oh.
And, nobody had any idea.
In Boca
Here
Raton.
in Boca Raton. And when I was approached by one of again, it's of course everybody wants to know why. My take on it was, of course we have no idea, but I would sort of start looking at struggling with sexual identity issues because there's nowhere to turn. There are especially then, no real role models, nobody to talk to. It wasn't okay. So again, it all turned inward. And I think even with a lot of kids that had that rage, that would think about homicide, suicide is the alternative to venting that rage.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be the case much longer. And I think we're starting to see with all of these online communities, and this is with where those incel idiots really...
Oh, those psychopaths.
And, again, let's be real. I made the point last week or a couple of weeks ago about this radicalization. I want to be very clear that the incels we see at the surface with all this radical stuff, they are alt-rights. They are neo-Nazis. They are jihadists. And in fact, there's a whole alt-right Muslim thing that I was very surprised to see.
But using that word more generically, I think it's high time we realize that quote-unquote terrorism, it seems to parallel nicely with good old American racism. And, if the skin is brown and the God is Allah, then we call it all kinds of horrible things. But these people that blow up abortion clinics, they're not terrorists.
Well, of course.
If the skin is white and they're doing it in the name of Jesus, they're not religious zealots and jihadists.
But that's what this process of radicalization really is about, this struggling adolescent identity that is feeling, in a lot of cases, attacked, disenfranchised, put down.
Well, now they're empowered,
and now,
right?
Exactly, with all of these online communities.
Yeah.
They find the empowerment. So instead of the self-loathing and the turning in, it's like, no, you're right. You're not the one to blame.
That's right.
They're the ones doing
right
it to
to
you.
be angry.
It's women who are doing this to you. It's people of color. It's trying to do this. I mean, again, it's the same. People don't see how we are so reliving this rise of fascism.
Wow.
But what we see, especially in, and again, I'm going to continue to use this word, radicalization of a lot of these sort of disenfranchised, struggling adolescents. You know, I would disagree with Dan Savage. One of the few times I really would. I heard him make the statement, say you can't, you know, just empathize or excuse the, you know, just misogyny and racism. You're right, but let's look at how a lot of people get there. And this is the process that brings a lot of people there because it is a lack of identity. And for some of these kids, like this kid in Texas, the shooter, and some of these other kids, the more they're seen as fragile in their masculinity, and the more they're hit with the most toxic phrase I think we have, be a man, man up, and try to sort of attack them with what does become a sort of toxic masculinity, it doesn't help anything.
You are so brilliant and gifted at doing this. You bring up these giant, profound points that we have to talk about with like 3 minutes left in the show.
Well, I want them to linger.
Oh, but that's, you know.
Well, this is good. This is a continuing thing. I think this is something that we continue to pursue.
Be a man is probably responsible for more messed up guys, damaged psyches and screwed up feelings and you know, any psychotherapist, of course, knows, anybody who's ever been around recovery environments, you know, treatment centers, there's always that ridiculous kindergarten poster on the wall, that how am I feeling poster with all the cartoon faces.
Yeah.
And it seems so basic and juvenile, like I need cartoons to tell me how I'm feeling. Your typical guy, especially growing up, being taught well how to mask feelings and emotions, anger and sadness. It stops right about there.
I talk about this a lot in my domestic violence training and have been for years, that what really causes or is the root of a lot of domestic violence is this thing called alexithymia, which literally translates into not having a language for emotion.
Yeah,
you know, guys have all the emotions. It's just they get up to a certain point, and we've never really been taught or given permission to express them. So they get jammed up. So then it's basically rage,
right?
And it comes out explosively.
And then people, what does this have to do with sexual health? Really?
Oh man, it has everything to do with sexual health.
Really, being able to express feelings and be in touch with your own and share them with another human being and be genuine and real and naked, more than just with your clothes off in the dark and a half in the bag. Ask
a lot of these women from Me Too what that may have to do with sexual health.
Yeah.
You know, and this concept of masculinity.
We have to raise sexually healthy men, and it's up to all of us.
Yes.
Sexual and reproductive health are men's issues as much, if not more, than women's.
Right, and we prevent sexual violence.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank
you
my
for anyone
brother.
who was listening in on our conversation. We love this. We hope you join us and listen Mondays at 9 next Monday and every Monday for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Have a great night and a great week.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.
The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
Chris, can you put the video game controller down for a second?
I can talk and play. Oh, I'm totally annihilating this punk kid in Nebraska.
I just feel like you're not acting like a grown-up in our relationship.
Am too.
Well, you know, you still ride your skateboard to work, there's the comic book collection, the race car bed.
Look, I'm young at heart. but I put money into my 401k every paycheck. I picked up a few savings tips at feedthepig.org. I have control over my financial life now, and that feels pretty grown up.
Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million bucks. Putting some money from every paycheck into a savings account or contributing to your 401k can make a big difference later. For